I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. This is the Billionaire Brown experience. Let's go.
So a great place that we can start is the worst part of your story is what, John?
Well, the worst part is this is the good part, but the worst part is that I was a heroin addict.
Heroin?
Yes.
Okay. When did you start using heroin?
I started using heroin when I was about 17. But my drug addiction and my alcohol addiction had started way before that.
Heroin before 17?
Yes.
Yeah. You've been taking drugs since what age? What age did you start using drugs?
I started using drugs about 11, 12 years old.
Wait, what drug were you using at 11 or 12 years old?
Alcohol and weed.
How was you getting your alcohol and weed?
Well, older friends in the neighborhood, just guys that I'd come across. The first time I got drunk, I was 11 years old. I had an older friend, stole some liquor from his dad, and we got drunk. I was always hanging with these older guys in the neighborhood. I always found myself in that kind of crowd.
Okay. And when did your parents find out that you were doing any source of drugs?
Well, that's another story in itself as well. My grandmother raised me. My dad wasn't around. My mother was in and out. My mother suffered from addiction as well. I think they knew early on I was drinking, but I was a rebellious kid, and I was a kid with no direction. So I took to the streets. I took to my friends. I took to what was going on out there. And I found myself quickly in the midst of drug addiction and alcohol addiction.
At what point, even if you have to look in hindsight to give us the most accurate answer, at what point were you doing it on the regular basis?
When I was about 12 or 13 years old, I was smoking weed on a regular basis. So there was a guy that up the street from me that sold weed. He sold loose joints up the street, and I was stealing $1 every day. My uncle lived in the home, and he always had a change, little container of change. I'd steal $1 every day, rearrange the change, and go buy a loose joint. And that's kind of where the obsession to use drugs and being taken out of myself began. And from that day forward, for a long time, it progressed. The drugs got worse. They got harder until I ended up using heroin. Okay,
so marijuana it probably didn't have, out of all of the different drugs that you just mentioned, it probably has the least effect on you, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that's not, okay, that's bad, but it's not heroin, right?
Yeah.
So you're utilizing you're drinking alcohol. When did your drinking of alcohol begin to be a regular habit, like on a daily or weekly basis?
Probably about 15, 16 years old. Yeah. And that was kind of a staple in my life. Like, that was always there. If I was hanging in the street, I was drinking, 40 ounces, and in the park, getting drunk, celebrating with the boys in the neighborhood. Alcohol was always a main component to whatever was going on.
Okay, and where are you from?
I'm from Camden.
Oh, you from Camden?
I am, yes.
Okay, I'm from New Jersey too, so shout out to New Jersey.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and my stepdad is actually from Camden.
Okay.
Yeah, are you familiar with Camden history?
Some, not too much, but some.
Okay.
My favorite poets lived in Camden and died in Camden.
Who's that?
That's Walt Whitman.
Walt Whitman was from Camden?
Not from Camden. He was from New York, from Brooklyn, but his house is on Mickle Street across from the county jail. So wow. He lived there and died in Camden.
Wow, that's a little fun fact for Camden.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so so we got alcohol, we have marijuana, we have heroin. When did heroin become a regular thing?
when I was about 17. Prior to that, I'd started also using cocaine. So I started using cocaine about 14 years old.
What?
I had older friends. I had friends that were already in the drug game. I hung with guys my age, but then we had the older friends, and they were, like I said, they were already in the drug game, and so just hanging around with them, they did coke. Naturally, I kind of went in that direction as well.
Okay, now, did the authorities ever become an issue during these younger ages? Like, did you ever get into a situation, maybe an adult or some type of authority approached you on this drugs that you're using?
No, not really. That's kind of what I lacked. I lacked in my life. Like I was raised by my grandmother. My grandmother worked really hard to care for not only me, but a lot of my cousins as well. I found that people in my family just didn't want to take care of their kids for some reason, or were incapable of doing so. Even now, as I'm an older person now, and I look back even on my mom. I don't know what happened with her, but I just realized she was just incapable of caring for me. Whatever was going on, I know she suffered from addiction, and she suffered from a lot of other things. I don't hold any grudge on that any longer, but I just realized that she just couldn't do it. She couldn't take care of me. So my grandmother raised me. She was working really hard, and I was kind of left to my own devices. And I was out in the street and doing the things that I was doing, getting into trouble, and getting high, drinking and getting high. I don't think they had any idea. My grandmother at least didn't have any idea that I was like using cocaine when I was 14 years old.
Okay, how were your grades at this point? Were you in school still, actively in school?
Not really. I mean, I was attending, but it turns out after 6th grade, everything kind of went downhill. So I went to 6th grade. I think I was about 12 years old. I was still doing good. I was in the top classes. And I met some other people from like East Camden and new people, and from there it just went downhill.
From 6th grade.
What's that?
From 6th grade,
yeah.
It went downhill.
Yeah. I don't know how I got promoted to 7th grade, but somehow I got to 7th grade, and then I just lost interest in school. I was getting high a lot. I was probably going to school maybe twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. We'd have these big hooky parties where we'd go to someone's house and all hang out there all day. And I got caught a lot. I got caught, playing hooky and cutting school. But probably about 7th grade, I stopped taking report cards home. No one asked me. I got in a little trouble for when I got caught cutting school, but it didn't deter me. I just continued to, go down that route. Did
you ever finish?
Ultimately, I got a GED.
Oh, okay. Good for you. So at what age?
I was 21. I think I was about 21, but I did 7th grade twice. I did 8th grade twice. I went to 9th grade. By that time, I already had a license and a car, and I was in 9th grade. So here I am, a 17-year-old in 9th grade with 14-year-olds, 14 and 15-year-olds. And at that point, I quit. I got left back again. And it wasn't because I wasn't intelligent. Like I could do the work, I just wasn't doing the work because I had found this other thing. I had found the drugs, the alcohol, and just kind of hanging in the streets, and I preferred that.
Okay, and this is probably not too far-fetched of a question, but at what age did you lose your virginity?
14.
14?
Yeah.
Wow. Did that have, there were drugs involved. Was the person you had sex with also doing drugs with you?
Not like in that particular instance, but that person was also a part of our group as well. So, there was drinking and smoking weed and all that, going on, but not in that particular instance. But the funny thing is I lost my virginity there at 14, but I didn't have sex again until I was 17.
Wait, why? Why was that?
Because drugs and alcohol was more important.
Wow. So when you had it at 14, it wasn't good enough for you to try it again?
Yeah, I guess.
Or the drugs were that much better?
Yes. Yeah. Like if you gave me a choice, if there was a woman here or a girl, or they wanted to do something, but you had alcohol and you had weed or you had coke, I'm going towards the drugs.
Wow.
I'm going in that direction.
So I guess that's kind of good and it's kind of bad, right?
It depends, but it turned out to be bad for me.
Okay. Yeah. So now how was you getting the money for that? I know you said when you were getting those little dollar joints, you were stealing, little change here and there, rearranging the change. But when it comes to cocaine and heroin, from what I know, those are very expensive drugs.
Yeah.
So how were you buying these at such a young age? How were you getting your drugs?
Well, I started working when I was about 15, doing roofing. I had an uncle that had a small roofing outfit. I started working in the summers for him, which ultimately led to like a full-time job. So there was money right there. Normally what would happen is Friday I'd get paid and Monday I'd be broke. So I'd be borrowing money throughout the week and all that. But I always, for the most part, I always had a job until I was about 18. And that's when my heroin addiction took off and I was selling drugs full time.
Were you selling because now you're saying your drug use picked up. So the normal person like myself would ask the question, were you using the drugs that you were selling also? Sometimes,
yeah. I sold crack and I was doing heroin, but every once in a while, I would use the crack as well. We used to do a thing where, you take some of the tobacco out of a cigarette, put the coke in there and smoke that. I was doing that, but mostly it was alcohol and heroin.
Okay. Would you consider yourself at any point a junkie or a crackhead?
I was definitely a junkie. Yeah.
Okay. And how would you define a junkie?
Well, I didn't see it at the time because it seemed to like I looked up to these older guys that was using dope before I started using dope. They seemed real cool. They were nodding all the time. I always looked up to the wrong thing and the wrong people. Just to take a step back real quick, I had an uncle that spent probably all of his 20s in jail in Bordentown, assaults and stuff like that. And we'd go to visit him on the weekend. He was the guy, and he's in jail, and we'd go visit him and take him food packages and stuff like that. He was the guy that I looked up to. He was the guy that I wanted to be like. He was tough. And one of the things about me is that I grew up in Camden and I grew up around a lot of violence and I grew up around a lot of trouble, but I knew deep down inside that I wasn't that tough. I put on a show and I got wrapped up in the streets and I was in a lot of predicaments that I didn't want to be in, but I didn't know how to get out of. I say that to say that like, I looked up to him because I wanted to be like him. I didn't necessarily want to be in jail, but I wanted to be tough. I wanted to be what my environment was demanding of me.
You want some street cred?
I wanted some street cred, yeah.
Okay, cool. So listen, ladies and gentlemen, this is John Fontanez, and he's out of New Jersey. He has an incredible story, and I think us creating this podcast is something that's very unique in itself. Whereas I've never created a podcast, released an episode on this podcast, knowing that someone was going to be creating their own podcast. So for those of you that are listening, the main objective, our intentions here is for John Fontanez to share his story, to impact, not just share his story, but to use his story as a tool to inspire and to empower other individuals that could relate to his story. And this is just really the beginning of what you're going to learn about this guy. And we're going to be here for 8 episodes. We're going to release these bi-weekly. And at the end of that 8th episode, John is going to be like an eagle and he's going to go out and fly he's going to spread his wings and he's going to have his own podcast. And as we know the name of the podcast, what the podcast is going to specifically be about in the next 8 episodes you hear from him, we will be announcing little by little by little so that you guys can go over and subscribe to his podcast as soon as it opens up. And you can also share it with your circle of influence. With that being said, John, why do you want to create a podcast?
Well, when I talked to you previously, I told you I listen to some podcasts. I love listening to people talk. I love listening to people get interviewed. I love to hear about people's lives. I'm just interested in the world around me and how people interact with the world around them. And that helps me grow and that helps me learn. So what I started telling you is a very horrible past. And there's a lot more to it, and there was a lot of destruction in my past. But at this stage, I'm a dad. At this stage, I have 2 daughters. I have one daughter who's 14 years old, getting ready to turn 15. And at 14 years old, I was using coke. And I have another daughter who's 9, getting ready to be 10. So I'm also divorced. And now I didn't have a dad growing up. My dad wasn't in the picture at all, as wasn't a lot of the dads that were,
Now,
fathers.
let me ask you this as you're unveiling your story.
Yeah.
So just for context, he wasn't around. What do you mean he wasn't around? Can you be more specific?
Yeah, definitely. He wasn't in the picture at all. He from what I've learned over the years, and I know him now, and we'll get into that as well. But he had a little fling with my mom, and then he was already signed up for the Air Force, and he went to resume the life that he had already planned.
Okay.
Now, I have my sister right under me. My father has 4 kids, 4 other kids besides me. She's 3 months younger than I am.
Mm.
So he had already went to resume his life.
Okay.
And he joined the military, and they moved around, and he had 4 kids, and he had that life, and so he wasn't, I was just a fling, and that was that, So yeah, he wasn't in the picture at all. I knew his name, and that was it. And I don't even know how I learned his name. Somebody, told me his name, but that's all I knew about my father. I knew his name.
Okay. I just wanted to ask. Go ahead.
So with that said, so I'm divorced, and I have my girls, and I have 50-50 custody with my girls. And I don't pay child support, and I don't pay any alimony because I have a wonderful ex-wife, and we worked it out. We worked it out amongst ourselves. We didn't start there though.
Oh, it was gritty.
I don't want to give the impression like we started there and everything was great, No, it was rough in the beginning.
Okay, good.
And the truth is I wasn't seeing my girls as much as I had desired to. That even though the marriage didn't work out, I still wanted to be a dad. I still wanted to be a crucial part of my daughters' lives. And what I had seen, number one, me not growing up with a father, and number two, sometimes dads are put on these court stipulations where, they're just not seeing their kids enough. And I thought about that. I thought about that in the grand scheme of things. I thought about that we only got this one shot at life. And sometimes we make bad choices. I made a lot of bad choices in my life. But the fact that my marriage didn't work out, I didn't feel like I should be punished for that as a father. And when you're on these court stipulated visitations, I feel like that's some sort of punishment. Like, hey, you didn't stick in the marriage for whatever reason. Now you're going to be forced to only see your children during these times, these days. And that's rough because I did that for a little while. And I thought about my own life and how I didn't have a dad at all. And I didn't have any male figures in my life. And the truth is though my grandmother worked hard to take care of me, nobody was loving me. Nobody was encouraging me. No one was hugging me. And I thought about all that stuff. And I still wanted to be a dad to my girl.
So, but because I know a large part of the audience you're going to have when your podcast is created, it's going to be probably dads just like yourself going through the same thing. But I'm very curious to know, I know for sure everything that you just said is true because my father wasn't around as much as I would like to.
Yeah.
Right. But I believe exactly what you just said. I believe that sometimes the relationship between the parents gets so toxic that the one of the other parents, they lose the energy and the fight they forget and they lose sight of what's most important.
Bad credit affects where you live, what you drive, and even your current or next job. With so many frustrating issues that happen in life, we can help you find relief. Text 480-358-7725 today. Not only will we fix your credit, but we will educate you so you can educate your family. Now back to your favorite podcast.